Welcome back to Buddhist Beliefs, Practices, and Debates. For this week, we're covering gender and sexual orientation. In the next slide, you'll see a video about the bhikkhuni. You'll notice that it says 2,555 because this is based upon the Thai Buddhist belief that Buddha was born in 543 BC. So they always do this. And so while we have the Gregorian calendar, which is very Christian, which would make it 2012, it's 2,555 in Thailand. And the bhikkhuni is a narrative about the people trying to create a space for women to become ordained in Thailand, which is actually real. But then about a katoi, a transgender male or female who wishes to be ordained as well. Please watch the video and we'll discuss this and its ramifications in the following slides.
หลวงพ่อคะหลวงพ่อช่วยบวชพระให้ดิฉันด้วยนะคะ
หลวงพ่อดีใจนะที่โยมมีศรัทธาในพระพุทธศาสนาพ่อไม่สามารถบวชพระให้โยมได้หรอกพระภิกษุนะมีแต่ผู้ชายเท่านั้นแหละที่บวชได้
อันนั้นดิฉันทราบดีค่ะหลวงพ่อแต่หลวงพ่อบวชให้ดิฉันเป็นพระภิกษุณีได้นะคะ
มันก็ไม่ได้อยู่ดี
ทำไมล่ะคะหลวงพ่อยังเป็นพระได้มีสิทธิ์บรรลุนิพพานได้แล้วทำไมหลวงพ่อถึงกีดกันไม่ให้ผู้หญิงบรรลุนิพพานล่ะคะศาสนาน่าจะเลือกคนที่ศรัทธามากกว่าเลือกคนที่เพศนะคะหลวงพ่อและมนุษย์ทุกคนน่าจะหนาได้เท่ากันนะคะ
ทุกคนมีโอกาสบรรลุนิพพานได้โดยไม่ต้องบวชเป็นพระภิกษุหรอกนะโยม
แล้วถ้าอย่างนั้นหลวงพ่อบวชเป็นพระภิกษุทำไมล่ะคะ
ล็กต้มยำถ้วยหนึ่งค่ะ
ค่ะนั่งเลยค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ ขณะนี้ดิฉันอยู่ที่สำนักภิกษุณีสมใจ ซึ่งภิกษุณีท่านนี้กำลังเป็นที่ศรัทธาเลื่อมใสกันมาก พระภิกษุณีหลวงแม่สมใจ เป็นพระภิกษุณีรูปแรกในประเทศไทยที่สามารถบวชให้กับผู้หญิงที่ต้องการบวชเป็นพระภิกษุณี หลังจากที่หลวงแม่ได้รับการบวชให้เป็นภิกษุณีโดยพระภิกษุณีจากประเทศศรีลังกาถ่ายภาพสิรินภารายงานข่าวไทย PBS
หลวงแม่คะ ช่วยบวชพระให้หนูด้วยนะคะ
หลวงแม่ดีใจนะคะ ที่โยมศรัทธาแต่โยมเป็นกระเทยโยมไม่ใช่ผู้หญิงหลวงแม่บวชให้โยมไม่ได้หรอกค่ะ
แต่หนูแปลงเพศเป็นผู้หญิงเรียบร้อยแล้วนะคะ หลวงแม่
เพราะหนูแปลงเพศแล้วหนูก็เลยเป็นบัณฑิตทางพระพุทธศาสนาอนุญาตให้หนูบวชหรอกนะคะ
แต่หลวงแม่คะ บัณฑิตไม่ใช่มนุษย์เหมือนหลวงแม่หรอกเลยคะ
Now, if you notice from the Bhikshuni, we saw that in the end, the Katoi, the transgender, was doing the exact same thing as what the woman did to the man. The woman asked the male monk why she couldn't get ordained, and he gave a response, and then when she became a female monastic, she gave the same answer to the transgender person. This is unfortunately a truth throughout many Buddhist traditions. The elimination or the refusal or the blocking of transgender people from monastic aspirations. If we recall back to the early time periods of Siddhartha, the Buddha's ideological stance was the middle path, that political point of being in the middle. He wanted to avoid the ascetic practices like the Digambar Jain monks on the right who were doing too drastic, or the Ajivakas that fasted too much. And at the same time, he wanted to avoid, on the left side, the Lokayatas, who were embracing hedonistic practices of pleasure and euphoria. This middle path between hedonism and asceticism was somewhat innovative and uncharted, and therefore prone to contestation. Since it's not an extreme, the question would be, where do you draw the gray boundaries? As a new religious movement, Siddhartha had to compete with local favorites, and this made social pressure a very real and powerful influence. Asceticism, which would be the denial or the refusal of worldly needs like food and water and clothing and shelter, was a familiar practice in South Asia. The idea of forgoing the flesh for that of the divine was something highly prized and understood. The more tied down we are to our physical limitations, the more mortal we are and the less control we have over ourselves. Part of the power a Buddhist monk accrued socially was from how much he distinguished himself from this world and its affairs. And this worldly affairs is lokiya that you see here. Lokutra is the supermundane, the otherworldly concerns, and monks were supposed to be concerned with lokutra, not tied down to lokiya, worldly affairs. Thus, Buddhist monasticism, although the middle path, had some initial stringent ascetic leanings which are so present in the contemporary world. For example, popular forms of asceticism revealed a release from samsara, the rebirths, from the cravings, tanha, that produce negative karma. There's the cravings for food, so monks, at least in Theravada Buddhism, were restricted from eating after 12 p.m. The cravings for comforts. Monks are restricted in part of their vows from owning nice blankets, comfortable clothes, or even sleeping on comfortable beds. The cravings of the ego. Hence they shave their head, wear the same clothes as everyone else, and they also shave their eyebrows. The craving for life, in which, as we mentioned last talk, about meditating on the foulness of the body. And in fact, Buddhist monks would meditate on carnal grounds, meaning where people's bodies had been burnt and their ashes remained. And last but not least, the sexual cravings. If we recall from the Panchashila, the 5 moral precepts, one of them was the avoidance of sexual misconducts. This is something that became a very big issue within Buddhist monasticism. There are many wonderful female role models in early Buddhism. Among them are the Therigatha collection of female Buddhist saints that are there. But the oldest have to do with Yasodhara and Mahaprajapati. Yasodhara was the Buddha's wife, Siddhartha's wife, who was pregnant with his firstborn and gave birth to him prior to Siddhartha leaving. And this picture you see is depicting this. Yasodhara with Siddhartha's newborn son Rahula. Rahula means tethered. When he decided to leave. And Mahaprajapati was his aunt, who ended up raising him as a stepmother because his mother died during childbirth. Both these women are figured prominently in Buddhist scriptures and in the Buddhist life, yet they remain very subordinate and subservient to Siddhartha. It was said that when Siddhartha became the Buddha and came back, Yasodhara, when she met with him, washed her hairs, or washed the Buddha's feet with her hair, which is a very powerful gesture because in Asia, the continent of Asia, the dirtiest, most least respectful part of a person's body is the bottoms of their feet, and the most sacred is the tops of their heads. So she's showing absolute humility by doing this. And she asked him if she'd done anything wrong for forsaking him and leaving her and his newborn child. The Buddha said there's nothing to be wrong, forgave her, and said that there's nothing wrong with her in front of everyone. But the fact still remained that he was not a husband anymore to her. He was a monk. His stepmother, Mahapajapati, decided to change things. She went and began to beseech Siddhartha to allow women to be ordained, and the Buddha turned her back once, said no. She came to his favorite disciple and his cousin, Ananda, and the queen, the stepmother, asked Ananda, can you please ask the Buddha to let females become ordained? And Ananda had to ask 3 times. On the 3rd time, the Buddha finally said, yes, okay, I will allow women to be ordained, but there's several things here. 1, by allowing women to become ordained, the longevity of the Dharma has been shortened by 500 years. So by that saying that his teachings will not last as long by allowing women into the order. And second, he said, women have to have a separate order. So by that he decreed that when men have 1 ordination ceremony, women would need to have 2. They would first need to have a ceremony that would temporarily ordain them with a quorum of female monastics. And then they would have to wait a while and then go to see the male monastics and get the full ordination there. And furthermore, whenever they met, the female monastics had to acknowledge their transgressions to the male monastics. Below you see what's called the Bhikkhuni Vinaya. This is the female monastic rules. And you'll see for Theravada Buddhism, females have to deal with 311 rules, where men have only 227. In the Dharma-guptaka, 348 versus 250 for the men. For the Mula Sarastivada, 364 rules. For the men, only 253. So you can see that for women, there's so many more rules involved. Many of them have to do with sexuality and menstruation. The Buddha did not stop there. In addition, he argued that the respects and the seniority provided in the Sangha were going to be different based upon male and female monastics. Now, ordinarily, seniority is based upon not one's age, but how long they've been ordained as a male monk. So if John has been a male monk for 25 years and Alex was just ordained yesterday, Alex pays respects to John. However, let's just say that Sarah is a bhikkhuni. She decides to be ordained as a female monastic, and she's been ordained for 30 years. When she meets Alex, who has just been ordained yesterday, she has to show deference to him. What this means is that no matter how long and how pious and how powerful you are as a female monastic, you're always lower than the lowest male monastic in the Sangha. This is a very powerful distinction in place. Now you could say this is very sexist, and you're right. But one thing we should note is that when the Buddha did this, there were no other religious traditions around him that allowed females to be ordained. So one can make the argument that he was being very progressive for his time. That being said, there is sexism in Buddhism. And part of this can be looked at when it comes to looking at women and karma. Now, my mentor and advisor in my PhD program was Vesna Wallace, and she's a short female. And she would often say that she's short and she's a woman because of her karma, her actions in her previous life. This may or may not be the case, but it's either because women are inferior and because of her deficient karma she's born this way, or it's because we're in a patriarchal society and because of her low karma she's destined to be in the lower rung because of it. So it could be sexist or non-sexist when it comes to explaining women and karma. But either way, karma is always used to explain the status of your births. Now, the Buddha in this picture on the right is under the famous tree in which he becomes awakened. People usually say it's a Bodhi tree, but actually archaeology suggests it's either a peepal tree or a banyan tree. But in any event, what we see around him is Mara's daughters. Mara is the incarnation of desire and temptation, and when Siddhartha is trying to become awakened, he is once again tries to be torn away from his path by Mara's daughters, who are the incarnations of desire, lasciviousness and sexuality and so forth. And this is not just unique to just this one particular incident, but we see women depicted again and again as desire incarnate. Here is the excerpt from the Buddhacharita, Canto 4. And here the Buddha is still Siddhartha the prince, who is yet to become awakened. This is his harem. The women betook themselves towards captivating the prince. These women looked with raised eyebrows, and by alluring, smiling, and lolling their tongues, made convulsive gestures, as if frightened. Due to the injunction of the king and the gentleness of the prince, they left their insecurity through rapture and passion. After that, the prince walked to the forest, surrounded by the womenfolk like an elephant, accompanied by a bevy of females going to the Himalayan forest. He shone in this beautiful thicket, moving in front of the women like the sun, surrounded by apsaras. Apsaras are going to be divine nymphs in the illustrious pleasure garden. Some of the women there, appearing to be tipsy with intoxication, touched him with their firm, swelling, closely set, beautiful breasts. Having pretended to stumble, another, with one firm, delicate breast, a tender body, and drooping shoulders, forcibly embraced him. Another, with a coppery red lower lip, and with her mouth smelling of perfume, panted in his ear, "Listen to a secret." Another one, moist with ointment, with the desire to grasp his hand, proclaimed as if commanding, "Make a line! Devotion here." Another one, whose blue lower garment slipped in the pretense of sudden rapture, with her girdle exposed, shone like flashing lightning during the night. Some of them with tinkling golden girdles sauntered to and fro, showing off their hips for him, which are covered with scanty garments. This is the earliest biography of the Buddha, and we should remember that this is written by a Buddhist monk, a male Buddhist monk. So we should be asking, what do we make of such a passage and the embodiments of the women that are being depicted here? Notice that these women are not being talked about as having names, their own ideas, their own perspectives, but they're merely vestibules of desire and trying to incite desire. Look at the language, the adjectives to describe them and what they're trying to do. And recall too, in this time period, the Buddha is trying to reach awakening for all mankind, and these women are trying to hold him back. What we can get from this excerpt is that perhaps Buddhist men were just as fearful of their sexual impulses and inefficiencies as men from other religious traditions. And this fear percolates throughout Buddhist monasticism. It was not just women who had trouble becoming ordained. People were excluded from becoming ordained at the time of Siddhartha for particular physical or social characteristics that would make them instantly unsuitable. What do you suppose those characteristics are? I'll give you a few. For starters, a man who possesses one of 5 diseases: leprosy, boils, ringworm, tuberculosis, or epilepsy. The Buddhist monastic order was known for having fantastic doctors, and as a new religious movement, the Buddha did not want to have people see his movement as those who had all these illnesses. The Buddha also disallowed a marked criminal, or a man whipped for punishment, or caned for punishment, or a man who is enslaved. All these reasons are because he does not want people to see his order being a place, a refuge for those trying to escape punishment. Likewise, there were other restrictions, just a few. If you have only one hand, 1 foot, 1 ear, no nose, missing a finger or toe, severed tendon, webbed fingers, bent over person, if you're a dwarf, if you have a goiter, if your tattoo is a punishment, if you have a club foot, if you're blind in 1 eye, if you're partly paralyzed, if you're crippled, if you're weak from old age, if you're deaf or dumb, all these, according to the Mahavagga, would restrict you from becoming ordained. Why do you suppose? Each restriction or rule about monasticism has a story behind it. For instance, there's one about disallowing a man who owes money. Now, the story comes from a section in the Vinaya, in the Mahavagga, and it goes as follows. At that time, a certain person was in debt, ran away, and was ordained with the bhikkhus. When his creditors saw him, they said, "There is our debtor, come, let us lead him to prison." But some people replied, "Do not say so, sirs. A decree has been issued by the Magadha king, Saniya Bimbisara. No one is to do any harm to those who are ordained with the Sakyaputya Samanas. Well taught is their doctrine. Let them lead a holy life for the sake of the complete extinction of suffering." People were annoyed, murmured, and became angry. "Indeed, these Sakyaputya Samanas are secure from anything. It is not allowed to do anything to them. How can they ordain a debtor?" They told this thing to the Blessed One, the Buddha, and he answered, "Let no debtor, O bhikkhus, receive the papaja ordination." This is the full ordination to become a monk. "He who confers the papaja ordination on a debtor is guilty of a dukkata, a badly done offense. So, in many ways, we see here that Siddhartha and his Sangha was an early form of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Politics of appearance. The identity of monks was crucial towards gaining new monks and adherents, and you needed to look the part as well as act the part. If you began to let people who were debtors into your entourage, then you would not look the part anymore. And with this in mind, let's turn now to a different set of criteria. In addition to the physical and societal obstructions that I've discussed already, there were 4 absolute disqualifications for becoming ordained in the Sangha. If anyone has committed any of the 5 grave deeds, this is the anantarya kama, such as matricide, killing your mother, patricide, killing your father, killing an arhat, killing an awakened one, causing the Buddha to suffer or bleed, or causing a schism, a split in the order. That's the first one. If a person has seriously wronged the Dhamma Vinaya, the Buddhist doctrine, if the person is an animal, it was known at times that, for example, snakes, nagas wanted to become ordained, or has an abnormal gender. And this is where we get into gender in a different way. Abnormal genders will include 3 classes of what the Buddhists call pundikas, as well as hermaphrodites. There are actually 5 classes of pandikas in total. The permissible pandikas would be people who are born as voyeurs and whose sexual fever is allayed by performing fellatio. So people who get turned on by watching others or by performing fellatio, these are particular types according to early Buddhism, and they were allowed in. But those who were not allowed in were castrated men, eunuchs, those born neuter, and the half-time pandikas. Now this photo here is of a statue from 2000 BCE in the Indus Valley that shows a hermaphrodite. And we know that the way that we understand gender in the United States, at least in the 20th century, this binary construction of male and female, did not exist in early South Asia. There were many types of genders, but only some were permitted in society in a affluent and respected way, and these were the ones that were allowed into the Sangha. Now, our own language belies our inability to think in a different way. I mean, consider in English what we say. We have to say transsexual, between sexualities, bisexual, one of the two, intersexual, bleeding among them. In this way, our language makes it difficult to think beyond the binary. Early Buddhist scriptures dealt with monasticism, describing a society built around the idea of 4 genders: male, female, Dubatobhyanjanika. The closest translation we have to this is actually hermaphrodite. And the pandika, which is a more ambiguous term. As mentioned, there are 5 different kinds of pandikas according to the Vinaya. In Thailand, it's translated as katoi. Today, katois in Thailand, such as the picture we see on the right, offer much more to their society, and the society offers them much more than the non-heterosexual identities in the United States or Eurasia. However, that being said, in Thailand, whatever gender you're born with is what you have as your title, a Mr. and Miss. So you could go through a complete sex change for very cheap in Thailand. In fact, medical tourism is very popular in Thailand for this reason, because some countries and some areas require people to wait a while before they have a sex change. Thailand does not. Katois are not looked upon as bad or really wrong, but they're not highly respected either. And again, if they're born as a Mr., they're always called Mr. for the rest of their lives. Like South Asia, we see in Buddhism more of an acceptance of male homosexuality than female homosexuality. And in many ways, the South Asian populace accepted multiple genders until colonialism. And this is where the British came in and imposed their rule, their law, enforced their way of seeing things, and became the people in power and established the binary gender system, which affected and transformed South Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India to this day. Now, to remind you, there is a difference between idealized and lived religion. Readings and discussions mostly germane to texts in early South Asia practices are going to be much more in the idealized fashion. Different developments and restrictions for Buddhist monks have taken place in various countries as the traditions spread and changed. For example, in Japan, Japanese Buddhist monks were allowed to marry as early as the 8th century, 200 years after Buddhism had come to the country. In 1872, the Meiji Restoration allowed the Japanese government to create a decree, number 133, that monks were allowed to eat meat, shave their heads, and take wives as they wish. This monastic marriage tendency led to temple families and later legal technical dilemmas, because, as we know from other religions like Christianity, one of the reasons of not allowing priests and monks to marry is that way their property would be inherited by the church. But when you let them to become married and have children, their children become the inheritors. In Mongolia, Whereas marriage was not officially condoned by their Sangha, during the 1800s, monks were known to publicly take sexual partners, rear children, and drink alcohol. At one point, when one Buddhist monastic leader tried to declare a rule that upheld celibacy, he was referred to as ruthless and derailed by his compatriots. In Thailand, there are strict vows that publicly keep people in line with the original ascetic practices. Monks are limited in terms of what they can own. They can't eat after 12 p.m. They shave their head and eyebrows every month. They can't own any luxuries, and no sex. These rules are not the same for all traditions, but in Theravada this is the case. However, while this is being said about the idealized version of it, in a lived capacity, Thai monks are known to have partners and are sexualized and eroticized. In Thailand, there are temporary ordinations. Almost every Thai Buddhist will ordain at some point in his life, for a couple days or for a week. A popular way is doing it during the rain retreat. And in this way, it's said that he allows his mother to go to heaven by conferring that merit to her, since there are no female monastics allowed in Thailand. So these are just men. But oftentimes, women in Thailand will talk about what they call the sexy monk syndrome, because they say that something happens when the man goes through the ceremony and shaves his eyebrows and shaves his head, and they put that oil on. Something happens that makes them attractive. At times, you can see that when a man begins to defrock and leave a monastery, there's a woman waiting for him when he gets out. So, on the books, no sex, not sexy, but in a lived capacity, a very different dimension. Now, in Bhutan, we have other very interesting sexual distinctions. In northeastern Bhutan, at the old capital of Punakha, a pretty remote valley with exotic Buddhist temples and monasteries, there includes one that celebrates the power of the penis. The story is that a divine madman was able to subdue demons by, and this is according to them, pulling out his enormous weapon, which he used as a sword in battle, ultimately thrusting it down the throat of the demons where it shot out fire. So this is also found, by the way, in other places like Thailand. The phallus is seen as a powerful device for virility, for sheer force, and we see this here in Bhutan, in the remote regions, this valorization of the phallus within a Buddhist culture. Buddhism is not without its controversies when it comes to sex and sexuality. There have been monastic sexual abuses in northeast Thailand. I mean, there's been reports of Australian tourists and even Thais being attacked. There was a local girl in Laos who kept on reporting that a male monk was sexually abusing her, but no one would believe her, and eventually she went insane. And we hear again and again issues of monastic sexual abuses, whether in the United States or elsewhere. Another controversy has to do with transgender, or we might want to say trans. I know this is posed as a contemporary issue, but as you know, it's an old issue for South Asians. Now, I am on good rapport with the first ever female monastic in Thailand. Her name is Dhammananda, and I've known her since 2003, right after she was ordained. And she's the first female Thai monastic to be ordained, but they don't recognize her as part of the Thai Sangha. It's a tricky situation. But all in all, I showed her that video I showed you at the beginning of this lecture and asked her thoughts. And while she was watching the beginning, she said, yes, 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 because she had the same issues as a woman did trying to become ordained. But then when she got to the end part with the Katoi asking, she started frowning, going, no, no, no. And for Dhammananda, she had some very interesting points to make. She said to me, Michael, we have to be careful. We are not even accepted in Thai society yet. I'm pushing for that. if we begin to allow transgender, the Katori, to come, this will just make it even harder for us to get the acceptance. We have to open the door a crack. And this is perhaps a sad truth, or you could say a cynical approach that we've seen time and time again when it comes to the advocacy of equality between men and women. Homosexuality has been a particular controversy, or which is a non-heterosexuality in Buddhist traditions. The 14th Dalai Lama considered it unnatural, but had to revise his stance a few years later due to public outcries from his Beyond Dogma dialogues and discourses. He later clarified that homosexuality was wrong because it involved the use of the mouth, rectum, or hands, as opposed to only using genitalia. And notice he's, by this, defining sexual misconduct for laity, ambiguity though at the initial context. And so in this way, Roman Catholic instances of dealing with homosexuality and sexual abuse are unfortunately not alone in this world. Many other religions have the same problem, and that includes Buddhism. Please make sure to answer the questions posted on Blackboard for the week in the discussion thread for week 7. I know I say this each time, but please do not forget to respond to at least 2 of your classmates' answers as well. These answers and responses are all due before Friday at 5 p.m. As always, please feel free to email me at mjerrison@gmail.com, and I look forward to reading your comments.